Okay, so you can see here I've got a fairly rudimentary site plan there with things that I've drawn in Revit mainly for the purposes of maybe doing something like you've done already, a site analysis. But I just want to make it clear why I emphasise so much the use of AutoCAD when you're setting out these elements, in case it isn't already clear. I've put in a sub-region there over this topo surface, which might be, you'd think, a good way of setting out the access road on that topo surface there, and then bring that around to the other side where the access continues. Also, it's the exit on that side. I don't drive in there, but it's entry on this side and exit on that side, isn't it?
No.
Other way around, entry on this side and exit on that side, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So we'd want that to continue around. And so you might be wanting to also then use that to start working out where your building's going to fit in. So I'll just show you what will happen though if you use that approach. I'm going to go and try to draw a reference plane now. And hopefully you're all used to using reference planes to set out your most important measurements. Notice how I can't even snap to the lines I've drawn already. Because I've used a sub-region, you can't easily snap to elements within a sub-region. It's one of those frustrating things in Revit. So if you just draw a sub-region straight up on your topo surfaces, you'll face lots of issues like that. They're difficult to manage and really difficult to work with when you want things to be accurate. So later as well, when you start putting in lots of different sub-regions, you'll see that you need to have between your road and your, say, your verge, you'll need to put in a gutter. And snapping to those edges as well is really difficult. So, don't worry, if you have to, you can. There is a way, but it's just not easy. So that's why, again, I've been emphasising this approach of using AutoCAD to set up all of that line work. So you can see here, I've just hidden the image and I've got there the lines for my access road drawn in 2D. It's really easy to draw that in AutoCAD. So I'm going to make sure I've saved this file. And then just like you've been doing already, hopefully, once I've made sure that is saved. God, that's slow. It shouldn't take this long normally. But got a few things running here. There we are. That's saved. So now back into Revit. And I'm going to go to Manage Links, CAD Formats. There's my drawing. Reload. OK. I can't see the drawing there because it's set to shaded, but if I go to wireframe, then you'll see the line work. So you can see there the line work that I've brought in from AutoCAD. So I'll start by adjusting that sub-region that I've drawn already, just in Revit. Going to Edit Boundary, I can use simple tools in AutoCAD like Align to pick the line work I've drawn in AutoCAD and just line up the lines I've drawn in Revit with that. Sometimes I might need to remake some things. It's a bit messy, so I can always just go back now and use pick lines and pick things that I've drawn in AutoCAD. So notice I can't pick these lines because they're sub-regions that I've made in Revit, but I can pick these lines because they're lines drawn in AutoCAD. So again, over here, same thing, that's the AutoCAD line work, which I'm going to assume is more accurate. Pick all these lines, join them all together. And then later when I go to make things that need to butt up against that or join to it, I know it'll be easy. So it's telling me overlapping lines. Here it's not a problem because I'm going to trim that back anyway. And for now I'll just connect these lines. Later we'll probably need to join that to the footpath, but again, worry about that later on. Okay, so then I can continue using pick lines and using the lines that I've drawn in AutoCAD. Oh, now here again, another mistake. So there, my sub-region line needs to come across. So again, with Align, pick that, put it onto the right line. Now it's getting a bit confusing to look at because I've got these lines still showing from the sub-region. If I finish it, it won't let me until I join it all together. There we go, so I just need to join these lines. So it's a closed shape. Should be able to finish that now. There we are. Okay, so those lines will go away and back to edit boundary now, and I can keep adding in using pick lines. So it's really quick. Once you've drawn things in AutoCAD, and this is the way Revit's always been designed to work in conjunction with AutoCAD. So again here, these lines are from AutoCAD, so it takes no time just to quickly pick those. And if I need to, just join, oops. Join in new lines in Revit. And, so I've left out, so this line here. Oh, and of course, okay, I've got to trim that. And this line here can go. Okay, so I've got a reasonable idea then of the roads that are going to remain surrounding our new building. And also, I can put in some reference planes. And there, I think I may have hidden, oh no, obviously. So I maybe haven't hidden reference planes. Let's just see, I'm going to go draw some. And I've actually drawn some lines originally in AutoCAD to set out my building footprint. I did these based on the boundary, so I've done them at an angle, so I might just use the line tool to make those rectangular. Also I'd use the reference, sorry, as I'm drawing the reference planes, make sure they're straight, in other words, at right angles to each other, because you probably realise Revit works better when things are at right angles. When you have things that are slightly askew or angles just slightly off a right angle, you get lots of warnings. So here again with that reference plane I've drawn, I'm going to really be careful and make sure it is perfectly at 90 degrees. And then now I'm going to copy that across to my other point here, and maybe round off that measurement. So it's a nice thing if the building is has a width that's a round number. So you can see there that's convenient. It's 44962. So I'm going to make that 45,000. And then the same thing going the other way. So I'm going to say this is going to be my set out point. So I've got that point established in AutoCAD, and I will try and maintain that point in that location. So I'm going to again use a reference plane to draw from that corner point. Coming across and making sure this one's horizontal. And then again I'll select it and use the copy tool, bring that down to roughly where I think the back of the building should be. And now you can see it's giving me a dimension to something else. It's probably to one of these solids or the road there, I'm not sure. So hopefully you know that you can always draw in your own dimension, or alternatively you can adjust any temporary dimension that comes up like that simply by dragging with the grip there and placing that onto the thing you want to measure. So 72,200, actually that's not a bad number. I could make that 72,000. I want to make that an even easier measurement to work with. So now, if I go back to shaded, I can still see the reference planes. So even in this view, I can see the building footprint, and of course in my other views as well.
There was only one building setback, wasn't it? It's just from the President Avenue, and obviously just in line with the two driveways. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And they're all at the back, at the end of the car park. So I've worked it out as being there, It could be brought back even further to here, so it's in line with this building. But there are car spaces in that area from what I could tell. I was just working it out from the satellite, but so there are car spaces there, I think.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. So you could go that far, but it doesn't have to. It could easily come back to this line, but that's the maximum I can go to. So I'm just going to set that out for now. So that's setting out the plan constraints. And then later, once you have an idea of your grid layout, you could put some grid lines in, probably following those reference planes, but then also in between that as well. So again, you're trying to set out your horizontal dimensions in plan. And then in section, you need to set out your heights. So using the section tool, it's really important that you have a section going lengthways through the site. And at first you might want it to one side of the site, so going through one of the access ways. And then of course you can drag that so that it projects all the way through, even maybe taking some of the buildings behind. And then I'll open up that section view and now get a better feel for the changes in level. So here we've got this ground line level, which is, it's important that you try to keep that fixed. So you'll see it probably won't move anything there, or any of the trees and other things, but the buildings, now that I've started to model some solids, they'll be attached, they have to be attached to a level. So this here, even though it's called ground line, it's really more of a base level. So when I move that, you'll see those solids will go with it. So it's important not to change that, and you probably don't want to use that for any building components. Okay, so you could even rename that, just so it's not confusing, and call it something like base level, and you may end up hiding that. And using another level to indicate the main ground line. It does indicate the ground line over here somewhere, but not really on our site. So you probably want to make a new level for the ground floor. And as I was saying earlier, try to get a good understanding how your ground floor level might sit into the site. And this is why it's so important to have those reference planes set up in plan, because now that I've drawn those, I can see in the section how big the building is, and then adjust the levels accordingly. Right, so the levels, of course, have a size, and if they're not long enough to encompass the building, it'll create all sorts of problems. So you can see here, I can just drag one of those levels across to the right, and then because they're all locked together, you can see from the padlock there, the tags on those end are all moving as a group. Now if I drag the other end, you can see only the two, the top and the bottom are moving. The other one isn't, because I didn't lock that end to those as I was drawing them, but it's a simple matter now to select that and drag it across, and when you see the extension line option come up, showing you they're in line with the other levels, you'll get the lock symbol, and that means they'll now move as a group. Okay, so it's important to have those levels set to the length of your building, and then the same way in the section going in the other direction, or one of the elevations, but I'll just use the section. Now again, I can see these reference planes, and that tells me how wide my building's going to be, and then I can extend the levels out so that they're bigger than the building. And then, back into the first section, or sorry, the section I was in earlier, section 2, we can have a look at where this building would sit. So level 2 is actually going to be ground floor. Always yes to rename corresponding views. And so we can see there, if I have the ground floor still a fair way above Perthorne Avenue, so Perthorne Avenue is about here, So just doing a rough measure there. That's still about 2 metres above the road level, which is too high, I think. Unless you want to have a decent stairway. You could have a big stairway as a big, nice entrance. But a nice feature stairway, it could be a really nice design feature. But if you want to have it closer to ground level, then you'll definitely need to excavate and have the building set into the ground. And then if you're going to do that, you'll need to think about having retaining walls at the back. And that might not be a bad thing either. So again, these are the sorts of design considerations you'll need to consider almost from the beginning. And so I'm going to take mine down a little bit. So I'm going to make that 16,000. Okay, so I'm a metre above road level. Still need a few steps up, but that'll still work. Alright, so it can still change. The great thing about Revit is that if heights change, levels are easy to adjust, and if you set your model up properly, the objects will go with the levels, and the building should adjust itself fairly well. And so now we're going to have the car park set out below the ground floor level. So you're going to have 2 levels for car parking. So using the level tool, you can just draw in new levels and start to get an idea of the separation we need between those. So if you have a look at the sort of separation that you should have between your car parking levels. 3 metres is good, yeah, that's actually more than enough. So yeah, so if you can do 3 metres, that is good. You need 2.2 head clearance, so that'll leave you 800, which is plenty. So yeah, so if you can do 3 metres, that's good. You can even sometimes do less, but let's say 3,000 as a starting point, and then and then 3,000 again. Okay, so now, I might just show you, if I go down and open one of these new levels, probably should rename them as well. So we've got base level there, which can be hidden. I'm just going to right click, hide in view elements. Level 3 is going to be car parking 1. And then part 2. So the problem now is that the levels don't go in order properly. So have you had a look at using filters and things like that, or rearranging the way that your project browser displays things like levels or floor plans? There are tricks you can use. So if you work in some offices where they've got that set up properly, it does work well if you can have these organised in a different way. But it's a bit tricky to set up, so often it's easier, and this is a common approach people use, just to rename them with, so if we were to start here, with numbers in the beginning. So car park 1 should be the second in the list, so O2, car park 1. And then, as always, yes to rename corresponding views, and it's going to rename the level over here. So you can rename either way, the project browser or in the level, as long as you say yes to rename corresponding views. And so car park 2 should be first in the list, so O1. Ground floor will be third. Now, have you been shown that you should make ceiling levels? Be making levels for your ceilings? I personally don't recommend it. I know some people do. There's nothing really all that wrong with it, but the reason I don't recommend it is because it can create extra work for you without really giving you many advantages. You'll see there's a lot of the setup in Revit files is based around floor-to-floor levels. So you'll see things like the view setups are based around the idea of a view that is looking up to the next level. And so if you put a ceiling level in the way, the view's going to stop there. So a ceiling plan, for example, is going to stop at your ceiling level instead of looking and seeing everything that's in the ceiling, and you have to go and then adjust it. So I just like to work with the defaults. It just is the least effort usually. So again, nothing wrong with putting ceiling levels in, and sometimes it's good to put them in at the end after you've put the ceilings in, just to indicate on your sections what the heights are. But if you put them in too early, again, you basically end up creating work for yourselves. So I'm going to suggest you leave them out initially and just put in levels for your floors. So here, level 1 will be my next level after ground floor. So that's number 4 in the list. And the height there, well, let's go and switch over to the brief because we've given you suggestions for all these. Okay, the setbacks there, so we might need to look at that. I totally forgot that we had setbacks suggested there as well. I've just been working off the plan, but we can definitely look at that setback and make sure it's 7. I should have checked that. It's nothing like 7, so I definitely need to have a look at that. So that's right, so I'll need to move that back, but again, that's the whole point of setting out. So, okay, so here, I don't have a dimension coming up automatically. I'm just going to draw in a dimension, because that's an important thing to indicate anyway. And so I'll make that 7,000. So that's better. Doesn't make any difference to anything else at this stage. So again, going back to my section. So I'm just trying to remember where I put the suggested heights. Here we go. Yep, so 5 metres for ground floor. This is just a suggestion, but I'm just going to stick with those. And so there, if I select the level, it will show me the height to the previous level. If you don't know if you've been calculating everything with the RLs. You don't always have to. Sometimes it's easier just to find the dimension to the level below. And of course you can draw in your own dimensions and probably at some point when you get the roof level in, you would definitely draw a running dimension between all those levels anyway.
Maybe.
Yep, sure.
I found if you copy a level up,
yeah,
it doesn't come unplanned.
Oh yes, I had a look at that last week. So what happens, I'll do that. You can do this to make a level, and I used to avoid it at first as well because I noticed that also when you copy a level, like you're saying, I'm just going to do that, copy it up. Then you can tell actually that it's not going to give you a floor plan because it's got the black arrow instead of the blue one. And in the project browser, obviously, we've got no floor plan for 04 level 2. But you can easily make one. If you go to the View tab and then Plan Views, Floor Plan, it'll then show you any levels that don't have a floor plan. If you turn this option off, it'll show you all your levels, but it's nice to have that on because usually you just want to make floor plans for levels that don't have one at first. Click OK. So now I've got a floor plan, just like if I'd used the level tool to make it. So you also need a ceiling plan usually, so you can go there, reflected ceiling plan under plan views as well, and just click OK to get one for that level. So now it's just like any other level. And so this will be 05, level 2. And then, again, just making sure it's the same as what I've given you before. Yeah, so then 4 metres for the other levels. Okay, so we've got there, yep, 3.9, so I'll just make that right, 4,000. So you need at least 2 levels above the ground floor. And then you should always have a level for the roof in addition. So the basic rule of thumb is at least a level for each floor, each main floor, and then a level for the roof. If If you want levels for other things, just to indicate height, add them in afterwards. So ceilings, parapets, things like that. And if you have balconies and other things where it's set down or set above the main floor level, just offset them from that level. Don't always make levels for all of those extra floors that are based on another main floor level or that are close to one. Okay, so then in the other section, you can see that my levels aren't the same length as the ones I'd made and adjusted previously. So a really good option there is to just temporarily disable cropping so that you can see how big those levels are and just bring them back in line with the others. Otherwise they'll extend right out. So the same with the section there, that's far too big. I can just bring that back up now. So these are things you can do later, but if you get them set up initially, it means all the views are going to be workable and useful as working views. Here we'll do the same thing with the section I was just in. So I'll turn cropping back on here, and now I can flick through the elevations and do the same thing. So my east elevation there, showing a few things that maybe we don't want to see, like these floating buildings. At some point I would probably fix those anyway, but we may not even need to worry about it because the elevation should be cropped, turning on the cropping region there, and we can just bring that in. And you may find if you've already started working in your elevations, you need to check the height and make sure it's showing you, and the same with your sections, showing you up high enough. So just do that for all your elevations and sections. Otherwise, when you have to do it after you've done a lot of modelling, it'll be much slower. Okay, so just flicking through all of those. Doesn't take long just to tidy them all up. And you can even then think about setting up some sheets with some rudimentary plans, sections and elevations on them, so you can just do whenever you need to a quick print of your project. Okay, so finally west. So that's the minimum. 2 sections, your 4 elevations, and a plan for each level. So I've done my sections and elevations. Now it's going to go through the plans and do the same thing. So it's surprising how often people don't think about these things until they get to the stage of printing the project right at the end and realise that their plans are a complete mess and other things as well. So here, this is a really interesting thing. Have you seen this before? When you go to a level down below the ground, and you might expect, well, what would you expect to see there? Nothing, really?
Columns.
Yeah, well, what else though? We're down below the ground.
Soil.
Ground, yeah, the ground, this is the earth. Okay, we should be seeing the earth cut, and we're not seeing it. And that's one of those things in Revit that will surprise you. A lot of people, even guys who've used the program for a while, struggle with this one. It's not an obvious thing to fix. But I'll show you how. So this is the final thing, and then I'll give you some time to work on this. If you go to the Manage tab, Massing and Site tab, then you'll see you have the Model Site panel where there's a button for site settings that a lot of people don't notice. That's really important and it's an easy one to miss. And that's where you see the options for a lot of the things that affect your topo surface. Now this isn't the secret, but this is still important to know this first. So you've got there the section cut material, and then the elevation of the poche base is what it's called. So it's poche, the way you pronounce it. Well, do you know what poche is?
Wouldn't have a clue.
No. Just shading. It's just a hatching. It's just a French word for hatch, essentially. So normally it means solid hatch, actually. But in this case, what they're talking about is the hatch pattern in section. Right, so I'm going to bring this down a bit, and you'll see down below the base, we've got the hatch pattern stopping there. So you've got to check that level first. And so just, again, showing that option. So it's minus 3,000. So 0 is down here, and that means the hatch pattern finishes 3 metres below that. So that's okay, but we still can't see the hatch pattern in the plan. So the next thing you might check is the visibility. Clicking on the light bulb there, we can see hidden objects, still not there. There's a bit of a secret thing in Revit that you need to know, that the topo surface as well has a material. So this option sets the way it shows in a section no matter what. But think about the topo surface, it's got its own material, and then each sub-region also has a material. They all show the same in section because of that site setting. But when you select the topo surface, you can of course set a material to it directly. So I've got this material called site plane, that's my main site material. I'm going to go and browse, and then go to cut pattern for that, and set it to the same earth pattern. Now, do you know how to make a 45-degree earth pattern? You had a look at that?
Where's that screen?
So? You have it? Or-
Edit. Duplicate.
Yeah, well, you'd think so, but where's the option to change the angle? Right, you think it'd be easy, but it's actually quite a tricky thing. I'll show you this later, just so if you don't know, there's a bit of a trick to it, but it'll take a bit of time. So I'll show you that later.
Does it matter, am I?
Yeah, you want to have it 45 degrees. Yeah, it's a nice thing to know. You can adjust any of these patterns, it's just not done using the options here. So I'll show you that later though, just remind me about that. So for now, I'm just going to set that earth pattern that I already have as a cut pattern. That's the secret. So now, when I go to my car park 2, click on the visibility button. Well, let's actually see. It's if I go to VV, and then in site, let's just make sure everything's on. It's a bit of a painful thing actually. Here we go, topography. Yep, that should be right. So why isn't it showing now? It should be showing. It's making it look stupid, but it will show. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it's showing in this one. So it's the depth. So I've got to go. So there we go. Car park 1, you can see that's working. So that's basically got it. Why isn't it showing in car park 2? Anyway, that's got it in car park 1. We'll have a look at car park 2 in a second. But notice how the areas with the different sub-regions also are missing. So I've got to go then to the materials for all of those. I'll just do this in the 3D view. So I'll just do them one at a time. I've got this asphalt bitumen, which I might rename and call site. So it's all grouped together. And then just in appearance, in graphics, sorry, cut pattern. Again, set the earth pattern. This one as well, site verge. So it doesn't take long, you probably won't have too many site materials. And here, while I'm at it, I don't even need to select the object. I know site access road is another material I've used, so I can, while I'm editing the other one, change that material and then go back to the one I had before. So hopefully that makes sense. And so let's have a look now, back to car park 1. And it's still, what's it doing? Okay, it should be doing it. I've just got the, it's a painful program sometimes. Let's have a look at those. Yeah, that should be right. Yeah, we'll fiddle with that, but it will work in the end. Play around with that to get it to work though. So another option, it's definitely meant to work once you get those things set. And then you can also, of course, draw in your own regions, which sometimes will work better afterwards. So using the region tool, sometimes you manually will just have to go and draw in a hatch pattern. So I'm just going to go and set one up. So that's ready to go, called Earth. And we've got the same hatch pattern there. So I can make it look exactly the same in any of those areas where it's not working. And there we are. It's a bit hard to see on screen, but the pattern is there. And so worst case, I can always just draw regions. So I'll just do a quick one there and make sure it's got invisible lines. Okay, and it'll blend in perfectly with any other hatch patterns. So worst case, that's always a solution. And it's important that you have that because you will have retaining walls that need to show the earth on the other side on those levels. Alrighty, so that's a good basic setup for your views. And, oh yes, I better just flick through. So with the other views, ground floor, got a crop, so that it's not showing all the site features. And you just want to get that set up before you go too far as well. So do that for each level that has a floor plan. And it'll make your life a whole lot easier. And so once you've established those constraints, you can maybe start looking at using that massing tool to work out an envelope for your building. Even if you're not going to generate your walls and other things from the mass family. It's a really useful tool just to get a basic idea of the form of your building and maybe do a bit of experimentation. And then, oh yeah, and so one last thing, to get the excavation done. What would be the first thing you'd maybe think about for your lowest car parking level? So, exactly, building pads, that's right. And would you do a floor on top of your building pad on that level?
Yes,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So do a floor as well always. Don't just try and do a pad and put your walls on top of that. Make sure you put a floor above the pad, and so then you can set the pad to be the foundation instead of being the floor.
Just a question.
Yeah, sure.
The masses, can you, if you say you've got all your levels set up on the project,
Yeah.
can you transfer them to the mass?
Yeah, you can't. You can't. So you need to go and redo them. If you want to see the levels in a mass family, you've got to make reference planes there using the same heights. But another option is to try using mass in place, or in place mass. So that's just like doing an in place family, but with the massing options. And it does work pretty well, as long as you're not doing anything too complicated. So if you just get a building shell set up that way at least, it's pretty straightforward. But I'll do an example of that after lunch. I'll do some of that when I do the things on families. So I'll get your screens back and stop the recording.